Thanks for staying with us. The President of COP28 has dismissed allegations that he is a climate change denialist. Sultan Al-Jaber has been accused of not pushing hard enough for the adoption of a more robust plan to phase out fossil fuels. A similar allegation is often made against South Africa's Minerals and Energy Minister, Gwede Mantashe.
The President of COP28 setting the record straight. The United Arab Emirates was criticized after the country nominated him to be the president of this conference. He comes from the oil industry, and fears are that he will not push for the phasing out of fossil fuels. This criticism has again been echoed.
We're here because we very much believe and respect the science. 43% of global emissions must be reduced by 2030. That is 22 gigatons. We need to reduce global emissions 43%. That is 22 gigatons by 2030. And we need to make that happen to keep 1.5 within reach. And I have been crystal clear on the fact that that is a critical success factor if we want to keep 1.5 within reach. Let me say from the outset that everything this presidency has been working on, continues to work on, is focused on and centered around the science. And I have been crystal clear on that point. And every opportunity I had with many around the world and all of my public engagements, I have always been very clear on the fact that we are making sure that everything we do is centered around the science.
He has outlined what the conference has achieved since it started last week.
The phase down and the phase out of fossil fuel is inevitable. In fact, it is essential. And this transition is, in fact, essential. And it needs to be orderly, fair, just, and responsible. And it needs to be well managed. So, allow me to say that I am quite surprised at the constant attempt to undermine this message. I can't not be clear about it. I am quite surprised with the constant and repeated attempts to undermine the work of the COP28 presidency and the attempts to undermine the message that we keep repeating when it comes to how much we respect the science and how we ensured that the science is what dictates our strategy for our strategic imperatives and the objectives we want to deliver at COP28. Let me just add this. I know that there are strong views among some parties about the phase down or phase out of fossil fuels. And allow me to say this again. This is the first presidency ever to actively call on parties to come forward with language on all fossil fuels for the negotiated task.
South Africa's Minister of Minerals and Energy took part in a discussion in which the burning issue was energy systems.
One of the most important things is that any myth that you can move from one extreme to the other will be a disaster for the world. That's why we're believing in mixed technologies, a multi-pathway of transition. You don't just say you move from coal to renewables. If you do that, it will be a disaster. There are few principles that are important. The first principle is that the question of agreeing is a very strong beginning. Everybody agrees that we must move from high carbon emission to low carbon emission. There's no debate about that. Where we have a debate is how is that transition going to be managed. And what is not going to work is when developed North want to impose the method of transitioning. We must be allowed to transition in our pace and at a rate that we can afford.
The U.S. envoy on climate change says more needs to be done to tackle climate change.
No, we have a lot more work to do. We are in a moment of urgency. We have to pick up the pace. We need South Africa to help. We had an agreement with respect to transition, and we've not been able to move forward. So I hope that we can make that happen. There are many other parts of the world where we need to do a lot more, including in my country. And we're working at it. So everybody has to come to the table.
Leave John Kerry. We're not a province of the United States. We're a sovereign. We have our own challenges, and we must deal with our challenges our own way. Solution can't come from America to South Africa. We will work on our realities and confront them. One of the second principle that I think is important, you never dismantle what works because you anticipate some good technology coming your way. You are anticipating it. It's not there. Yet you have not proven its resilience. You have not proven its reliability. You have not proven its efficiency. And then you dismantle what you have. If you do that, you are heading for a disaster.
What's happening in Komati?
Komati is a disaster. Even people who didn't agree with us at the beginning are beginning to agree that it was a disaster. It shed jobs, it shed megawatts. Therefore, it's a disaster. It's a transition, but it can't pass the just test.
For the United Kingdom, the issue of infrastructure must receive priority.
And this transformational change will trigger £90 billion of investment over the next 10 years in our grid. But as I said at the beginning, this is a global challenge, not just a national one. And as we've just heard, the IEA projects that we will need to double the current amount of global grid infrastructure, enough electricity cable to go around the Earth 2,000 times. I can announce today that the UK is supporting the African Development Bank, so they can lend an additional $169 million for transmission networks in Kenya and Mauritius.
Sophie Mukwena, SABC News, Dubai, United Arab Emirates.